go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I am Sarah Ihrig from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. As I said, coming to you then from cold Minnesota today. And I'm excited to talk with you today about the Transfer Student Advocate training that we developed on our campus and maybe walk you through the process for developing one on your own campus. A little bit about me. So I came to the University of Minnesota as a transfer student and a first generation college student myself many moons ago. So I'm really excited to get to work with transfer students full time. 88 degrees in Georgia. Come on now. Sorry, I just saw the chat. I'm so excited to be here today and to share with you our program. So as I was saying, my job is kind of interesting in that I work centrally for the University of Minnesota, keeping an eye on transfer student success and the transfer student experience. And so my job kind of sits at the hub of, it's a Venn diagram of like orientation, admission, and academic advising. So I get to kind of work with people in all of those areas. And so mainly my focus is once students are on our campus, how are they doing? How are we supporting them? And how can we help them be successful here? So with that being said, the agenda for today, I'm going to just really, really briefly to give you a little context, share with you a little bit about the University of Minnesota. Then I'm going to do kind of a quick high-level overview of the transfer advocate training that we have here. Then we're going to dive deep into how, what steps you might take to develop your own training. And as I do that, I'll share with you more specifics of our training and as well as some of the materials that we use. And then I'll talk about how I evaluate the training and what I'm thinking for next steps. And I'm really trying to keep an eye on the chat here. But please feel free to ask questions as we go along. I certainly will have some time as we go along here to pause and maybe ask you to ponder something, take notes and share. And I certainly welcome our wonderful moderator, Chantal, to please just feel free to interrupt me cold if I'm missing a bunch of questions here in the chat. So Absolutely. With that being said, I'm just curious as I can go here by a show of hands. Does anybody have a transfer advocate training at their campus already? No. I'm kind of scrolling through participants here. I'm not seeing anybody in any share of hands here. All right. Well, if anybody has a program similar, I would also be happy to hear your wisdom and knowledge as we move along too. So with that being said, the U of M at a glance. So we're a fairly large urban campus. We straddle Minneapolis and St. Paul. About 30,000 undergraduates at any given time. And we admitted, as you can see, about 7,000 new freshmen this fall. And then between fall and spring semester, we admitted about just over 2,000 transfer students, which means that there is, there are about 25% of our undergraduates at any given time are transfer students. So pretty large transfer population. And I would also note that we are a really decentralized campus. And so it's kind of one of the reasons that my role exists is to kind of keep an eye on all the great things that are happening for transfer students across our institution and kind of bring up those best practices or help identify issues and develop programs like this. So with that being said, one of the reasons that we wanted to develop this training, and again, one of the reasons that my position exists, is that we know that compared to their freshman counterparts at the University of Minnesota, our transfer students report feeling less welcome on our campus. They have a lower first-year retention rate. They are also more likely to be commuters, more likely to be Pell eligible, more likely to be first-gen college students. And we're a PWI institution or primarily white institution, and our transfer students are more likely to be students of color as well. And we know that that is a factor as well in feeling welcome on our campus. So all of these factors make paying attention to our transfer students and their success for us really, really imperative. So what does our advocate training look like and how did it get started? As I said at the top, I'll do a brief overview now, and then we'll dive deeper into the actual components of the training and of some of the materials that we use. But to kick us off here, we started the training in 2018. And again, it was this part of efforts that we were wanting to implement to improve campus climate for transfer students in general. And we have a central transfer student advisory committee that I helped to lead that's made up of representatives from all over campus, and they actually helped come up with the idea, which is great. And then I worked with our Office for Equity and Diversity to think about a model for developing an advocate training. At that time, that office had developed some really great and powerful trainings around how to be an advocate for various populations on campus. And the concept of advocacy in general is something that they were doing a lot of great work with. And so I really wanted to work with them as well to get their take. I offer the training every semester, every fall and spring. And to date, I've had about 300 staff and faculty attend the training. I will say it's been a lot of staff. I would love to see more faculty attend the training as well, but I think I'm not alone probably in stating that. It's sometimes harder to engage faculty around things that happen outside the classroom, right? They're like all of us, they're busy and working hard on their own departmental committees and probably research as well. And so that's kind of been the one thing I'm working on at this point is getting more faculty involved. But yes, over 300 staff have attended the training and faculty, and it's been really great. I have one coming up again in March, and I can't believe that after doing this for a few years, I still have, at this point, the training is 6 weeks away, and I already have 30 or 40 people signed up to take it again. So it's wonderful. I keep reaching new people. So the training itself is about an hour. I'm sorry, it's about 2 hours when we do it in person. Since COVID, I've moved it online, and I've made the training then an hour and a half. I just can't make people sit for 2 hours for virtual training. It feels like it's too much. I think I would lose people. So the training really, I kind of funnel the information down. We start with, in general, why transfer students matter as a distinct population. Take a look at some national trends. I look at U of M transfer students and what challenges they are facing on our campus, what supports we're offering our transfer students to help kind of advertise those and let them know how they can help. I then have a student panel that is made up of 3 or 4 current transfer students who speak about their experience. And then I have the attendees create their own transfer advocate plan. And I'll share that document with you that I have the participants use in their training. And so the thing that I've cut out of the training, by the way, when we are not together in person, is I always leave a little more time for sometimes discussion. And then normally when the training's in person, part of the enticement to attend is I am lucky that I have a budget to provide a really good breakfast. So that always helps. All right. So after the training, participants, I give them all an I am a transfer advocate sticker for their office. And it might sound kind of silly, but we all still like getting swag. I think we never grow out of that. And I also like the idea of creating a visible marker for transfer students to see around campus. So I encourage people to put that outside their office door or in their office somewhere that students see it when they come in, so that they know that the person they're talking to gets transfer students and sees them. And that's been really neat to see too, as I walk around campus, those popping up. I also have attendees complete a post-training evaluation so I can get some feedback. And again, I'll share that evaluation tool with you as well. And then I add all of our attendees to a Google Drive that I created, where I store all of the training materials and the transfer data, which is a really nice way then to communicate with people as well. And then I don't have to resend training materials or worry that people got it. It's all in the Drive so they can access it in the future when they need to. And so I can't say at this point that I can actually correlate, right? Transfer students increase graduation rates or retention with these trainings. But I will say that I think one of the benefits of the training that I've seen and has been really pleasing to me is that it's caused more conversation on campus. Certainly, I think through word of mouth, I'm getting more inquiries for data and people asking about our transfer student initiatives and how they can develop their own on campus. So I think it's led to it's certainly highlighted and increased the level of conversation we're having about transfer on our campus. And there have been some small improvements I've seen on campus as a result. So for instance, I had a faculty member tell me that after the training, she added a welcome message just for transfer students on her syllabi with an invitation for them to come in and see her and come visit her and a welcome to the U of M. I've also had departments say that they have increased their communication specifically with transfer students. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily creating new events for transfer students, but maybe communicating with them as a specific population and sending specific invites to events. And I've also seen that more departments then are advertising the central things that we do for transfer students on our campus, like workshop series and student groups, et cetera. So it's been a really nice way to just level up the conversation and encourage people to think about the transfer students that they are serving. And I'm going to pause for a minute and check out the chat. Oh, someone asked me when the training in March is. Yes, feel free to send me an email, John. I'm happy to chat with you from UM Morris. And if you want to attend, that's great. And otherwise, it's just, yep, a lot of weather conversation. That's great. All right. Does anybody have any questions before I move on, just about the high level training? Feel free to unmute and just ask. I'll pause for a minute. No, okay. All right then. I am moving on. So I think this is where we get then to the kind of the meat of our time together today. Oh, wait, I see 2 more chats. Have you recorded any of the virtual trainings that you could share? I have not, unfortunately. I will probably do that this time in March. I think I keep thinking that doing this virtually is going to be a one-off thing, right, due to COVID. But I'm happy to share with you any of the materials that I have, the presentation I use, et cetera. So please follow up with me. I'd love to do that. And I would love to attend. Yes, send me an email. Happy to follow up. And how do I get attendees? That's a great question. I didn't say that, Shayna, so that's a good question. So I utilize 3 U of M listservs that we have. We have one for all of our career counselors on campus, one for our academic advisors, and then we have a general listserv called Diversity Link Up, where it's for folks who are in any position on campus and interested or engaged in DEI work. And so I tend to get a lot of messages there. I also send a message out to previous people that have attended the training, just saying, hey, FYI, I'm doing this training again. If you have colleagues who might want to attend, let me know. And so that just seems to do it. Did you get a question about the sticker? Did you get your marketing office involved for permission or to match branding? Yeah, I'm really lucky. I work with a communications person. And we have kind of a bank, an online resource of U of M word marks and things that we are allowed to use. So I kind of worked within the parameters of our colors and in our fonts and things like that to create a sticker. Yes. Okay. So moving on here. So what is your campus transfer student story? So I'm going to say that I think for me, the most challenging part, and I will say honestly, it took me probably almost 2 years into my job, was to actually think about and create that transfer student story or that transfer student narrative. I think it's really easy to have disparate pieces of transfer student data in your head and maybe different things and resources that you know about transfer students. But I think creating a narrative about what you want people to know and understand about transfer students and how they can support them is the thing that takes some time. I remember early in my position, I did a training where I was able to share some facts and figures about transfer students with another office on campus, but I hadn't really developed the so what part of the conversation, if that makes sense. And so I would encourage you to give yourself some space and time to really think about that part as well. Like, what do I want people to know about this? Let's see, moving on. And so I really think when I think about our transfer advocate training, it really is, I would say there's 3 major components that you want to develop. I think you want to get your data together, your objectives, i.e. what do you want people to get out of the training? And then of course, line up your campus partners who can either help you develop the training, maybe even co-present with you, or are going to at least support the training and maybe help you advertise the training. And we'll kind of take a deep dive into each of those 3 components now. So with data, I think it's really important to think about what do you know, how do you know it, and who can help you get this data. So I admit at my institution and with where I sit positionally, I'm really lucky to have access to a lot of data on a lot of very smart data people who can help me interpret that data in ways that I, as a non-data scientist, could not. And so I think on the qualitative end, I would say all of us, of course, I think are probably very student focused and naturally would gravitate towards wanting to highlight and put the student experience front and center, right? I mean, that's kind of probably just intrinsic to who we all are, right? And why we do the work. So I think that incorporating the student story and feedback is probably intuitive and fairly easy for all of us. But I would also make sure that you pay attention to what staff and faculty are telling you about the transfer students they work with. Perhaps especially those that you hear maybe complaining about transfer students, or who will tell you that transfer students don't do as well at your institution. I think it's important to understand what they're seeing and hearing. Not that you need to validate the narrative necessarily, but to understand what the narrative is. And if there are issues, it's good to know what those are and uncover them, right? So you can either help to solve them, or again, help change the narrative about who transfer students are on their campus. And then of course, we all have a ton of perhaps quantitative data that we can get our hands on. I think we have admission data, right? Who are our transfer students? Where are they coming from? What type of institution? What institutions? What do they want to study here? And maybe perhaps sometimes who is not applying or who is not getting admitted is also important to understand. And of course, demographic data as well, right? Who are they? And I think it's important to understand, not only things like race and ethnicity, but age. How many credits are they transferring to your institution with? Where are they coming from? Are they coming from nearby? Are they commuting from a long distance? All kinds of different things. Pell eligibility, first gen status, etc. And then of course, things like retention and graduation rates are really important. Academic performance data, I will admit that this is something that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about on my own, but when I was developing this training, there also happened to be another work group on our campus who was looking at gateway course data, those big gateway courses that new students often take. And they were looking at academic performance data and had broken that down by freshman versus transfer. And it was really, frankly, sobering to see some of the levels of D, Fs, and W rates that our transfer students were earning in some of those big gateway courses. And then things like participation in high impact practices, like study abroad, research, student groups, our honors program. And then of course, I'm sure like most institutions, we survey our students to death. For example, we have a pre-orientation survey that students are required to fill out before they sign up for their orientation date. That's kind of the carrot. They have to tell us about themselves. In fact, it's called the Tell Us About Yourself survey, or the 2A. We do a check-in survey midway through their first year here. And then we also participate in the SERU survey, which is a national student experience in a research university survey for R1 research institutions. So getting all that data and putting it together is challenging, but it really can help you create a narrative. For instance, before I looked at this data or took this position, we would have assumed that most of our transfer students are older students from community colleges who maybe are too busy, they're commuters that are maybe not that interested in being engaged on campus. Well, when I look at our data, what I find is actually half of our transfer students are coming to us from another four-year institution. 60% of our students are 20 and younger. And those who are coming from another four-year institution especially are younger. And those students really consider themselves to be more sophomores in talking to them, right? They still see themselves as being on track to graduate in 4 years. And so transfer student isn't necessarily a label they identify with. Also, I was able to use the data to kind of disabuse people of some notions about transfer students around involvement. On that pre-orientation survey that I mentioned, we asked transfer students how likely they are to do or participate in certain things. And we had students tell us at very high levels that they plan to do things like get involved in research, join student groups, study abroad, etc. But when I went to those offices to ask them about their participation rates in these practices, we saw that the numbers did not match the same level of involvement as freshmen, or the same level that they were telling us that they wanted to do these things. And so what that told me, and what I was able to share with people was in this training is, transfer students actually do want to participate. They really do want to do these things and be involved on campus. Clearly, there are some institutional barriers or life barriers that are being put up that are preventing students from doing this. So we can't just assume they don't want to do these things. So that is just one example, perhaps, of how I've been able to kind of form that narrative and share with folks around campus a little bit about who our transfer students are. So I'm going to pause for a moment to check out the chat, and also to give you a minute to perhaps ask some questions. And then I would like you all to maybe take a minute, if you can, to think about your data sources and who can help you get this data. So I'll just pause for a minute here while we do that.
It looks like we have a Sarah, we have a couple of questions in the chat box.
Okay. Do you find that your efforts are more geared towards the first semester year transfers to your institution or any student that identifies as a transfer? That is a great question. I think it really depends. I mean, I think we do pay a lot of attention probably more to that first year experience because we really want to make sure we help students get off to a strong start on our campus. We have really great welcome week programming and orientation programming, but once they're here, it's kind of like, okay. And I have found that some transfer students identify with that label of transfer more strongly than others. For some, it can be a fleeting identity. So for the most part, our efforts are geared towards that first year and getting students kind of acclimated and launched into their communities on campus. However, I do have a few transfer student organizations that provide great kind of ongoing leadership and support in community for transfer students. Would I be able to share a copy of the pre-orientation survey? I do not own that survey. That was developed by my colleagues in the orientation office. So I would have to ask about that. But yeah, it's a pretty thorough survey. So I'll see what I can do. Do you find that transfers are taking advantage of welcome week activities? We have a hard time getting them to attend as 80% of our transfers don't live on campus. Yeah, Megan, that's a really good question. It is a challenge. I would say that we have seen some pretty strong involvement. It's not required the way that it is for freshmen, but we do have a pretty robust week of activities. And again, I think who is taking advantage of it? Who's taking advantage of it are those transfer students that younger group that really live near or on campus and really want to be a part of everything and want to see it all. I do find that our students who are maybe a bit older, and by older I mean like beyond 21, and who are commuting, perhaps we're not getting them to attend so much. So it's kind of evolving. But yeah, we definitely have, I would say, I think one event last summer we had 400 students come. And the ticket to that was kind of a tailgate before a football game on campus that they got free or reduced tickets to. So that was kind of our carrot there. It sounds like the training is voluntary. Have you thought about or investigated including it as part of the mandatory institutional onboarding? I have not. That's a good idea, but I have not gone that route yet. And how often do you hold the training? Yes, twice in an academic year. And does it help students, people understand the differences between those who start in the fall versus spring or summer? We don't admit for summer, and we do admit a few hundred students a year. And with the hour and a half virtual or 2-hour in-person training, I certainly can't get into everything, but I do certainly talk about that and make sure that people are aware that we do admit those January transfers. I mean, January in Minnesota, that's a brutal time to be starting a new school. And you're right, I think our campus isn't necessarily in the mode of welcoming new students the way that they are in the fall, right? There isn't the big residence hall move in, all the welcome activities. And so, yeah, that is definitely something I mentioned for sure. All right. But back to the data, does anybody have any insights or thoughts about the data that they're able to gather, or questions about the data on that end before I move on? Okay.
Well, I guess I'll actually speak up rather than using the chat.
Yeah, hi. Please. Hi.
So I think that one thing about the data is that it's useful whether it shows you a rosy picture or a bleak picture. And the reason for that, right? Like if it shows you that there are some equity gaps, then it is reason that we need this training, that we need more sensitivity, that we need to think about our processes and policies and the way they're serving transfer students. If they're rosy, which is what I encountered in my institution, we have higher retention and graduation rates. Our transfer students have an average GPA on campus of about a 3.4. Like they're are strong, and they're 40% of our students. So,
wow.
But what that does is, so it made me, I created Appalachian State, who I think I see Karen here from App State. Kim Morton showed me 2 NISTS ago her infographic, and I publicize, like I put the good news about transfers out during National Transfer Student Week to try to offset any preconceived notions faculty or staff may have about transfer students, because in fact, they're stars.
You know, Megan, I'm really glad you said that. It's something that I should have included, and I think thought about touching on at one point and then left. Yeah, I think what's the challenge is that if you want to make the case that transfer students deserve more support, you want to make sure, right? We want to make sure we're doing that in a way that isn't necessarily always like this deficit narrative, right? And so it's balancing out the good news about transfer students and all the wonderful things that bring to our campus, but also they need more support, right? And if they're more likely to be these populations that we know are at risk, then we need to attend to that or wrap transfer students very specifically into those efforts, right? So you're right. I think it's a combination of celebrating that great news, which is a really good reminder. I'm really glad that you said that, Megan. Thank you. Yeah. So celebrate the good news too. And leave, I would recommend, certainly you want to leave people who are attending your training with some positive feelings about transfer students, not that these poor transfer students are always going to come here and be behind and they're never going to be as successful. Thank you. That's a really good point. All right. So the next piece of training, though, that I want to make sure that I touch on here is your objectives. And again, I know some of this might seem really obvious, but I think it's really important to think about how your training is going to benefit students, right? And again, that might seem obvious, but you know, what is really the outcome for students that you want? And then staff and faculty, right? The people who attend your training, what are they going to be able to know and do as a result of attending this training? And then finally, I also think it's your campus. I think it's really important to align this training with your institutional goals. And again, I know that might be obvious, but I think so often in student affairs, you know, it's so intuitive to us, right? That of course this is something important and students should be at the center of things. But high level objectives related to this kind of a training might not be something that you necessarily share with people in the training. I don't, at least the campus objectives, but when I'm designing the training, pitching the training, wanting to get support for the training from my supervisor, who was amazing, and higher ups, you know, I think it's really important to be able to tie that training to institutional goals. For instance, we have a stated goal of wanting to improve campus climate. This training ties into that. Our University of Minnesota Regents, kind of who run the university, right, that board, they have set a goal of increasing transfer student graduation rates, which is wonderful that they're seeing transfer students and have that as a marker, but also then I can point to that and say, yeah, so I need some support for this training, and it's important because of these higher level goals. It's not just me and my little transfer world, right? We're trying to support 25% of our student population here on campus. So I'm going to share with you the goals that I use in my training on the next slide here. And then I just want to give you a minute to read them, take some notes perhaps. Oops. Take some notes and yeah, think about your own objectives and what they might look like for a minute. So the goal number one is to increase knowledge and awareness of the U of M transfer student population among staff and faculty, to promote transfer student access and participation in university activities and resources, and identify specific next steps that we want people to take to be an advocate within their role by encouraging transfer student participation and or removing access barriers. And I think that last one is a big deal. We have a lot to offer transfer students on our campus. So I think I encourage the participants to not just think about creating something new, but how are they removing barriers to things that already exist in their unit that transfer students just are not taking advantage of. So I'll give folks a minute to read and ponder that, and let me know if you have questions about objectives. All right. All right then, partners. And this is something that you want to be strategic and think about too. So who are your transfer cheerleaders on campus? I mentioned that when I developed my advocate training, I was able to work with and consult with somebody in our Office for Equity and Diversity around the concept of advocacy, and looked at their model for the trainings that they do. I had also mentioned that I'm really lucky to have access to and work with some really great data folks on our campus who help me make sense of all the data that we have. And I have really great institutional support. I report to our Vice Provost for Strategic Enrollment Initiatives, and she has really helped promote the training to both the higher ups that she works with, these deans for undergraduate education in our various undergraduate colleges here, and other folks around campus in general. So I felt like having that support to launch it, spend the time developing it and promote it has been really, really helpful. So I see a couple more questions in the chat. Oh, someone good. Oh, Lorraine, great idea. Is there any two-year partners here who are looking to develop training? That's great. And it sounds like a super great initiative to help educate staff on the student population. Are there any specific calls to action you give staff members who attend or ways you encourage them to assess their own departments? Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning, and I'll go into it in just a minute here. During the training, part of the last 20 minutes or half hour, I actually have people spend time. I provide a worksheet and have them develop their own transfer advocate training and do a little mini inventory. So I'll share that with you all in a minute for sure. Yeah, I definitely want people to come away with some action steps. I don't just want it to be passively taking in information, for sure. And then lastly, is what you have done continue to do with this training at the university level? Transfer admissions is primarily a function of the individual colleges at my university. So Robert, yeah, so this training is not around admission at all. The data that I'm sharing is really about once our transfer students are on our campus, how are we serving them? How are they doing? What resources do we have to support transfer students? And why do they matter as a distinct population? So this training is really targeted for those who aren't working with transfer students directly, right? Our faculty don't do a lot of academic advising, if any, on our campus. So it's really professional advisors who might work with transfer students, but might not know a lot about the population as a whole, faculty who see them in their classrooms, other student affairs professionals, housing, people all over campus in different departments that have attended the training. I hope that answered questions. Anything else I can answer before we move on, or any other thoughts? Okay. Thanks. I will move on. So, okay, the nuts and bolts of the training. So creating your advocates. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the way that the training agenda works, I like to think of it as a funnel, right? Taking people from the big picture to the campus level to what they can do specifically in their sphere. So it's national and institutional data, current campus initiatives and support, and then how can I support transfer students? Or as you see in the gray boxes at the bottom, kind of the generic, like, what is the issue or problem? Why does it matter? Or why should I care? Okay, fine, what are we doing about it? And then how can I help? So that's kind of the model that I use. And then the training, the assessment worksheet that I have folks do, I want to be very clear and give a lot of credit to the Aspen Institute Transfer Playbook. They have a really great tool for assessing progress toward adoption of essential transfer practices for four-year institutions. It's a mouthful. They have one for two-year schools on that website as well. But it's a really long, thorough assessment for institutions to do, to really kind of look at their best practices and look at where they're at in serving transfer students. So I adopted that, made it much shorter. And so it's part self-assessment checklist, and then also prompts them to do some information gathering and goal setting. And so I am going to share that with you very briefly. This is also, by the way, the PowerPoint and the evaluation that I use, which I'll talk about in a minute, are in the conference app in my program. So you have access to all of these as well. All right, so, all right. Can someone let me know, can you all see that worksheet kind of well? Is that kind of, sort of?
Yeah, we can see it. We can see it pretty good.
Okay. So very briefly here. And I'm sorry, the formatting got a little goofy when you're trying to go back and forth between Word and then PDFs and Google Docs. So feel free to big, borrow, and steal, use this as well. So the first part of it, as I mentioned, is a resource checklist where I'm asking them to think about what their unit is doing. And the way that it works is we're either looking at what might not be offered, what's developing, offered, required, or if they're not sure, or if it's not applicable, right? So I have things on this checklist for them to think about, like check back advising appointments for first semester transfer students. Are they reserving seats in key courses? Do they have a first year seminar or course for transfer students? Transfer student organizations, are they participating in Welcome Week and hosting transfer students during Welcome Week? Other events for transfer students? Are they doing outreach for transfer students regarding events, resources, opportunities, really thinking about transfers as a specific audience? Do we have career events and outreach regarding career planning for transfer students, right? Scholarship money for transfer students, always a hot button issue, right? Transfer student representation on advisory boards. And are they tracking transfer student participation in events? And do they have an assessment plan that includes transfers as a distinct or specific population? And then I asked them to think about maybe, are there other things that their unit is doing regarding transfer that aren't on the list? And then to think for a minute about what resource gaps they've identified then. Then we move on and I asked them to assess what they currently know about their transfer students. So this prompts them to ask about what they know regarding transfer student participation, grad, retention rates, what activities and resources they're offering for transfer students. And then I asked them to think about what they would like transfer students to, what they would like to know about transfer students that they don't know and who can help them get this information. And then I asked them to develop a transfer advocate plan of their own. And again, at this point, this is 15, 20 minutes, so we're just getting the ball rolling here. But I want them to, I get them into small groups to talk about this as well. But I want them to identify one goal related to transfer student advocacy, and then ask them to kind of think about the resources they need to meet this goal, who they can partner with the action steps they will take in the short and long term to meet this goal, and then how they're going to measure success of this initiative. All right, I'm going to go back to the presentation here. I see a chat. I love that you adapted this. Oh, the Aspen Institute self-assessment is fabulous, but harder for any individual to fill out alone. Yeah, it is. You're right. We went as a team and did this. And even with 3 of us from different parts of the university, we could not fill out the Aspen Institutes thoroughly. But in a way that was useful, right? Because it made me go, oh, I need to know this. This is the growth area for me. Okay. All right, any questions about that self-assessment tool before we move on? And feel free to just unmute and speak up or throw something in the chat. And by the way, I end the training by having them kind of share what their ideas and goals are, if they're comfortable with the group, so that they can all hear what each other are planning to do too. And that creates some good conversation as well. Okay. And then finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, I add our advocates to a Google Drive that I've created just for this transfer advocate training on our campus. And I love it. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's a repository for all the training materials and data, and means I don't have to resend things to everybody. And I can just add, updated infographics as we get them each year. It also is frankly, a good place for me to keep the data, so I remember when I'm refreshing it for the next semester, I know where to find it. And it's also a kind of a nice way to connect with the advocates with different articles and opportunities. I don't bombard them too much, especially given that the list varies from people who work with transfer students every day to a faculty member who might attend the training one time, and that's kind of it. But I do sometimes find articles that I'll send them occasionally if they're short and succinct about transfer student issues. As I mentioned at the beginning, I also send the advertisement to the advocate training for them. So knowing that they've done it already, but perhaps they'll pass it on. And I also send them, as well as others on campus, a reminder about upcoming transfer students events on campus. Again, I try not to abuse their goodwill by doing this more than a couple times a semester, but it's a nice way to keep in touch with folks. And then, okay, evaluation and next steps. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I share with I have our folks fill out an evaluation at the end, and I'll show it to you now. It's simply a short Google form. And again, this is also in the materials in the app that you can find. And again, I know it might not be the best, but are you able to kind of see it at the moment? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so really it's pretty short. I asked them about the session length, what feedback they have, if anything they wanted to change, content length, format, handouts, etc. I asked them what the most valuable aspect of the training was, if it met their expectations, and how they might want to connect with their fellow transfer advocates in the future, whether it's just through the Google group, whether it's through informal gatherings, or a more structured opportunity to develop a transfer advocate action plan to follow up on that. So it's kind of interesting. to get their feedback. All right. So what I have found and my takeaways from this evaluation is that by far and away, when they write in their answers about what was the most valuable, the student panel is always number one. Always, always, always number one. They love to hear from students, as we all do, about their training. And also, I also mentioned this briefly, but I cannot believe how many write-in comments I get about the food and the swag. If you joined a little bit later, I mentioned at the top that I'm fortunate to have a budget that allows me to provide a really big breakfast for this training, like eggs, bacon, potatoes, like the whole deal. And I cannot believe how many thank yous and comments I get about the food. I guess we never outgrow that college student desire for free food and swag. And so, and by swag, it's not only the transfer advocate sticker, but any little thing. You know, I have other stickers, handouts, little promotional items, things like that. My office sits within the orientation office. And so we always have stuff lying around here, right, that we can give away. And also I found from this that participants want opportunities for further engagement. I'm going to be really transparent and say that has been a challenge, that part of it, what to do. Pre-COVID, I organized a couple brown bags for people to come and chat after the training to follow up. Attendance was kind of meh. I think some people wanted to be more structured, but when I've offered more structured things, people haven't necessarily engaged. And now with COVID, I think on every campus, right, we're all feeling busy, stressed, a lot of people doing more than one job. And so I think I need to revisit this for next year, but I do see a desire, I think is the takeaway, that people want to keep engaging in this and having conversation about it. So I am looking at the best way to provide that, that format. All right, and I have a couple more chats here. 10 minutes, okay, got it. Thank you. What questions do you ask the student panel? I asked the student panel to just describe their, if you email me, Amber, I'm happy to send the questions to you or to anybody. I asked them general questions about if they could describe their experience here as what they remember about their transition to the U of M, things like what they found helpful, what they wish they had more of, what has been the most useful thing, what they would tell other transfer students or people who were students who were thinking about coming to the U of M. And then just share maybe how they found community on campus, what tips they would give, as I said. And then I really open it up. I open it up to the floor, and I always have to cut that off. There's never a shortage of questions. And I will say the first time that I did this, I was a little nervous perhaps about what people would ask students. But you know, people have been really respectful and kind. And not put students on the spot. And it felt like a really warm and welcoming space for students to be honest and share their experiences as a transfer student on campus. So suggestion for a follow-up for faculty in STEM on my own, creating equitable transfer pathways in STEM. Oh, thank you. That's a great suggestion. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Okay, I just have a couple more slides here. Let's see. So I mentioned this briefly, next steps and future directions. So one thing I have started to do, which has been really useful, is there are plenty of folks on campus who maybe don't work with transfer students that often or that closely, or just, again, see themselves as busy and transfer is not an integral part of their work, that I have taken this and turned it into what I call a roadshow. So I will go to an academic department or I went to a career services office a while ago and did kind of a mini version of this training. And if I have enough lead time, I can actually get data that's more specific to their unit, which is great too. So that's been really nice and really an impactful way to reach people as well and provide them what they see as very useful direct data. I'm also this spring working on creating a digital faculty toolkit for those faculty who don't plan to attend the training, just to give them some resources. And again, some is better than nothing, right? We can create advocates in any way, shape, or form. And as I mentioned, I'm really working on how to re-engage those past participants with either advanced training or more opportunities for discussion. So that was kind of it for me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can look at you all. And please tell me if you have any questions or if there's anything else, any thoughts, reactions, anything else I can be of help with here with our remaining couple of minutes. This is tangentially related, but I really appreciate these questions from Tackling Transfers Transfer Student Focus Group Guide. Oh, what a great resource, Emily. Thank you. I did not know that that resource existed, or I forgot about it. Yeah. Well, thank you all for the kind feedback. But yeah, I'm open. Any questions, feedback, thoughts that you have, feel free to just unmute too at this point and ask away. It's better to end a couple minutes early than run late, right? I'm standing between you all and lunch. Are you part of the PTK honor roll? No, we don't have a PTK chapter. We have Tau Sigma on our campus.
Sarah,
Yes.
I'm interested in attending your March training. Can I sign up at the website, or do you need to send me something?
Yeah, if you could just send me an email, I'm happy
Okay.
to. Yeah, I'm happy to send you an RSVP form. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And if my Morris colleague is on the call, before I forget, I do just want to mention that the data is very Twin Cities campus centric. So you are welcome to attend, but just wanted to put that out there. Okay. Yes. But yeah, feel free to shoot me an email. I know it's in the conference app. I look forward to hearing from y'all. And as I said, the materials that I shared with you today are all there, but if there's any other questions or things that you have, if you have want information about, don't hesitate to let me know.
Hello, everyone. Just wanted to remind you guys to make sure that you fill out the conference evaluation. Thank y'all.
Yeah, thanks for your time. I'll hang out for a minute until the session officially ends. Enjoy the rest of the conference, everyone. Do we have a transfer student center? We don't per se. We have kind of the admissions office has what they call a transfer admission center, but it really is focused on admissions. And it's something I'm working on, a dedicated space for transfers on our campus. And interestingly enough, I've heard different feedback from students about whether this is something they would find useful or not. Whether this transfer identity is something that they want to hold on to in that way. So it's kind of a challenge. I would love to hear other thoughts and experiences with a transfer center as well. I know there's been some recent talks and professional development opportunities around that, but yeah. All right, I'll hang out for another minute or so if people have questions. Feel free just to unmute and ask.